It's time for the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.
That's right. Welcome in. Another edition of the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. Recording earlier in the week because, well, it's Thanksgiving and we all have lives. My name is Brandon Baney, and living the North Idaho life is our North Idaho resident and expert, Ryan Scaggs. What's up, Scaggs?
Surviving after the weekend, man. What a crazy weekend of events and, man, some awesome state games. Holy cow, there's some great games this weekend.
Yeah, really exciting games, especially at the 5A, 4A level, I feel like. And then you had some really good dynasty type stuff at 2A, 3A, and then really just compelling stories overall in the 8-man ranks. And so we did have two teams from North Idaho competing in football championships this past week, Ryan. Which one you want to start with?
Let's go 1AD1.
Yeah, what 1AD2?
Yeah, sorry, 1AD2. Sorry, since it seemed to have happened like a week ago. So yeah,
we'll start there. Thursday night at the Kibbe Dome. It was a date, Ryan. You and I were in the booth on the call for the Kendrick Tigers.
Long time no see.
Absolute demolition and dismantling of a really good Camas County team. 68-0 ends up being the final. Kendrick falls, not that they were aiming for this, but just from a statistical perspective, they fall 4 points shy of tying the all-time record for most points in a championship game set by the 2014 Prairie Pirates. Shout out to Coach Ryan Hasselstrom. But 68-0 win by Kendrick. It's their third in a row, and as they prepare to move up a level next year, I mean, they couldn't have asked for anything better. They'll carry a 25-game winning streak into next year's season opener.
Yeah, and you look at what that team was able to accomplish this year, and they, Coach Hobart tries to schedule up and, able to pick up some of those 1AD1 teams early in the year to get his team battle tested and to try to keep from getting some of those games that we saw last year where they had teams bailing on them at halftime. And, I know they had at least one or two of those this year, but, they got some push, and it showed as they matured through the season. You could see the senior leadership there from Ty Kep and some of the other guys take over. But really what I think it did was it lifted the whole, like I don't know how you want to say it, but like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. But those young guys that can step right in, and you saw some of the guys come in the second half too. And monster games, obviously, from like Hunter Taylor and Lane Clemenhagen, and Ty had a great game. But then you see like these young guys pop in, and you look at the bright spots for the future, and they've got a 25-game win streak. I don't know if that goes away anytime soon, just based on all the pieces they're going to return. But I mean, let's revel in the present too. But 25 games, 3 consecutive state championships. They're, last I saw, the number 1 ranked 6-man or 8-man team in the country, according to Max Preps. I mean, that's a huge statement for that program and what they've been able to accomplish. And I don't see that state championship train getting derailed anytime soon. Let's put it that way.
All right. So here's my question.
Yeah.
You talked about Kendrick always struggling to find opponents. We know that Kendrick has the fundraising capability of sending, I don't think we've discussed this on air, but we were talking about this off air. The Kendrick girls basketball team is traveling to Sitka, Alaska for a tournament this winter. That, that's not cheap. Can't we fund a game where Kendrick could play an 8-man power from somewhere else around the country? How cool would that be?
Texas, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, shoot. I mean, Coach Hobart gets to fly charter coming back from Twin Falls after the Hagerman game. So I mean, like, no, I say that jokingly. He had an event to go take care of, and he was flown by one of the dads of the kid on the team. So I can't give him too much grief over that. But I mean, yeah, I think realistically being able to try to schedule an 8-man power from somewhere else in the country, I mean, that'd be stinking awesome. And maybe that's something that Logan Green needs to get on to try to fundraise for, getting sponsors together for a neutral site game or something like that here on Idaho Sports. But no, that'd be an awesome event. I look forward to them going up a classification too. I think it makes scheduling those non-conference games a little bit easier. You can get the Butte counties continuously on the schedule. I think you can get the Oakleys, you can get the Grace. There's going to be teams like that are going to be willing to play them year in and year out moving forward just by going up a classification in addition to a tougher conference schedule.
Right. Yes, they'll have 7 dates filled next year by White Pine League members. So only 2 dates that they're going to have to fill in this championship performance specifically. Ty Kep, IdahoSports.com, player of the game, well earned in his final game of his career. Ryan, 15 of 19 passing, 401 yards, 4 touchdowns. He also ran for 13 yards and 2 scores. So he had 6 touchdowns in total. And I mean, here, stop me if you've heard this before, but here are some of the other stat lines. Nathan Dwight, 2 catches, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns. Hunter Taylor, 3 catches, 70 yards and a touchdown. Also returned a punt, 67 yards for a touchdown. Sawyer Hewitt, 71 yards rushing and a touchdown. 5 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown receiving. Just an embarrassment of riches for this Kendrick program.
Yeah, and then the riches get richer. I think that, you could throw some of those stats in, and I don't want to say it was garbage time because they're still playing against starters when their backups came in late in the game. That number 2 group that came in, they still, I don't know if you noticed, but all but 2 guys that were on the field for Camas County were starters. When that team went down the field and scored a touchdown when that young group came in. Yeah, I mean, you look at the championship performances, you want to say big players step up in big games. You got that. And I think defensively, was the unsung, like we talk about the offensive gaudy stat lines week in and week out that this team churns out, but you look at the defensive side of the ball and what they're able to do up front, where you've got Dallas Morgan getting double teamed every single play still. And then it clears the way for other guys like, Boyer or Clemenhagen, or, just name who you want, Fitzmaurice, all of the other guys that show up on the defensive side of the ball that are able to make huge plays. You got a big turnover from Mason Kimberling, got an interception there deep in the red zone to thwart the deepest attempt of the night from Camas County. So, defensively, I think is the one that we talk about offense so much with this group. That defensive group is so dang good. And you look at what they gave up this year. I think they averaged at the end of the season, it was 8 points a game in 8-man football. That's unheard of.
Yeah, I mean, it's just insane to think about. So well-earned wins for Kendrick all the way around. 3-time defending 1AD2 champs. They'll be now moving on up to that apartment in the sky like George and Wheezy did all those years ago, and moving on up to the White Pine League 1A D1 edition, or next year 2A edition. And good luck. So congratulations. Kendrick finishes the year undefeated as well, 10-0. All right, the other championship game participant, Ryan, came all the way at the other end. 5A Coeur d'Alene Vikings had to travel down to Holt Arena to play for what essentially was a home game for Highland in the championship. People tell me, I sound like our former president. People tell me Holt Arena was the loudest it's ever been in its history.
The crowd was huge.
The crowd was huge and magnificent.
Maybe the biggest ever.
That other guy, he comes, the crowds are not so big. And
well, the other guy there was the beef this week between ISU and U of I between who had the better dome. So,
people tell me that Kibby Dome, nothing to it. Anyways, I'll stop the bad impressions.
Good, maybe bad.
Anyways, yeah. people told me that Holt Arena was the loudest they had ever heard it for this Coeur d'Alene Highland battle, and it just went back and forth. I'll just kind of chronologically move through the game, and then we can recap. Yeah. Highland did win 35-28, but Coeur d'Alene strikes first on a trick play. They did a double pass, a wide receiver pass for 84 yards from Joe Hagel, who had been a JV quarterback previously. So he's got an arm, but he hits Kai Wheeler on an 84-yard touchdown. So Coeur d'Alene's up 7-0. Highland answers, though. So we're tied 7-7 at the end of the first. Second quarter, Highland jumps ahead 14-7, but Coeur d'Alene, undeterred, scores with 1 minute to play before halftime. Owen Harris scores from 5 yards out. It would be the first of 3 touchdowns on the day for Harris. We get to the third quarter, opening possession for Coeur d'Alene. We're tied at 14-all. Harris again scores from 5 yards out. It's 21-14 Vikings. And to come out and punch Highland right away in that second half like that, I thought was really impressive. But again, Highland shows their championship pedigree. They're not phased. They come down and not only tie it 21-21, but they score again to take a 28-21 lead into the fourth quarter. And that's where Coeur d'Alene goes back to the well, digs deep again, and Harris scores for the third time in the contest, this time putting the game at 28-28. So we're tied at 28-all with about 7 minutes to go. Highland's got the ball. They're at midfield, and this was the backbreaker. 4:28 to play. Highland quarterback Drew Hymas breaks free for a 47-yard touchdown run. 35-28 lead for Highland ultimately turns into a Rams win. We were kind of joking, and we said, first team to 10, maybe 14 wins this defensive battle. And boy, both of these offenses showed up in a big way. It's a shame somebody had to lose. Coeur d'Alene came up just a handful of plays short.
Yeah, I don't know who had what was it? Almost 1,000 yards in total offense on their bingo board, but like that was something to start this game. I was like, man, first team that breaks 150 team yards is probably going to have the chance to win this one. But we saw an offensive shootout, and that's something that we haven't seen Coeur d'Alene play like is getting into an offensive shootout like that necessarily. And that's a Highland offense that you look. I mean, everybody talks about Hymas, but man, their running back is a stud too. And that was the thing that showed up in that game was just Coeur d'Alene tries to stop one thing, and it's like it's like plugging holes in a boat. And then something else breaks free, and Hymas obviously getting that touchdown late in the game. I don't necessarily know if that was a backbreaker because I really thought Coeur d'Alene could match scores there and come back down. The way they drove the field in the second half to start things off, they'd really seen something in the passing game, and they were taking advantage of Kai Wheeler in the passing game. They got a big play out of Kazar. They got I think it was a 54-yard gain in one play. But then, Simmons throws that late pick, and that was kind of the backbreaker there. Coeur d'Alene did get the ball back again late, but just it wasn't enough. I mean, I really, they had to punt that away. Highland comes down, gets the score. CDA gives it right back on the turnover, and that was all she wrote. It's a couple knees, and that was the ball game. But what a phenomenal game. I mean, just from the get-go, it really – Coach Amos, I just saw him go to the bag of tricks early, and it wasn't that they needed to. It was just like the swagger coming into the game. They get the big stop early. They come back out and just throw a haymaker, punching Highland right in the mouth with that big, long touchdown on the trick play. That, kind of set the tone, but it was just a back and forth affair. And just one of those ones that, Sean Kane and I talked about it off air was, not that we were on air, but we talked about it in messages and stuff, was that, how great that game was. Like, really, you look at it play for play, what happened in that game, and just like the massive plays that had to take place, 3rd and long, getting a 14-yard first down for Coeur d'Alene. Like, there was so many of those chunk plays that happened for both teams. That was just a one for the ages. I don't really know how else to say it. That state championship game, if you paid and you drove the 600 miles it was to Pokey from Coeur d'Alene to go to that game, you got your money's worth, even though it didn't come out on top for the Vikings.
Yeah, it was a pretty epic battle between two teams that really over the last 15, 20 years, Sean, have really carved out a nice rivalry between the two, considering they're so far apart and they really don't play each other except in the playoffs. They did, they have scheduled each other in the regular season a couple of times here and there, but for the most part, I believe Paul Kingsbury was talking during the broadcast on IdahoSports.com, and he basically said, Highland's last championship game in 2017 when they beat Coeur d'Alene, and Coeur d'Alene's last championship game in 2013 when they beat Highland, and so they just always seem to get matched up. Yep. Epic battle, though. Congrats to both teams. No shame for Coeur d'Alene this year, and remember, nobody in the preseason, not you, not I, not any of the coaches in our preseason coaches poll, nobody picked Coeur d'Alene to not even win the conference, right?
Yeah.
It was all Post Falls, and Coeur d'Alene, I think, had a chip on their shoulder all year, and they proved everybody wrong time and again. And it was a great season for Coach Sean Amos and company.
Yeah, 100%. That was just an outstanding job by Coach and what they were able to do, and playing a tough schedule. And I think it all started when they made that QB change. We alluded to it early in the year, but the tide really turned for that team and for the better coming down the stretch. And then you saw them get the revenge win, the big win at home against Rocky. That's when you could kind of look at this team and go, "Oh, this team's built different." Like, you look at this defense, this is a different animal with an elite defense like that. And obviously came up just shy in the state championship game.
Yep. All right. So that concludes our football championship talk, but we pivot now to, let me see if I can pull this down for a second. Da, 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 for the third year in a row on the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com. It's the Scaggs Awards. We're coming to you live from the beautiful Chamber Elks Lodge in Sandpoint. And no, I'm just anyways, it is time for the North Idaho Prepcast. And really it's Ryan does this every year and we love it. It's your All-North Idaho football team. And you separate it into large school and small school. Kind of take us through the basics while I attach my microphone back to its stand here.
Yeah, so it's the All-North Idaho Awards that nobody asks for. Nobody ever gets anything from me. Maybe one of these years I'll print them a certificate or something and send them a cookie. I don't know. But no, just recognizing the outstanding efforts and players, around the North Idaho in District 1 and District 2. So I broke it down for large schools, 5A, 4A, 3A. Small schools going to be 2A, 1A, D1, 1A, D2. I don't try to be partial and give the participation awards to make sure every team is represented. I give the awards like my best to who I saw as having the outstanding efforts this year and this season, from the respective schools. And it's based upon, a lot of stuff about what I've seen eyeballs on myself or what I've watched on film through either Huddle or, clips that have been out there through the press as well and reading through stats. But I did put a lot of effort into this to break it down. There's one name omission that I did leave off that I really feel really badly about, and it's on the offensive line at 5A, but I'll get to that and I'll add him after the fact. But you're kind of looking confused because I totally forgot to text it to you afterwards. But
well, you can tell me and I can put it in real quick.
Will Fairbanks from Coeur d'Alene at center.
Okay. I mean, because I thought you were saying like, oh man, I had to make a tough cut because we only have X amount of slots available.
No, I can make as many slots as I want.
That's why I looked at you and I'm like, dude, there's legitimately like 5 running backs on this team. Like, what are you talking about?
There's 4.
No, you gave 5 out to 5 different kids.
Okay. We'll go through it. How about that?
You're like, dude, I was looking at the like preseason all conference teams for college hoops, and like the SEC, their first T-ball conference had like 8 guys on it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot basketball's played 8-on-8.
Well, so this is like my, you think about it, like you want to have like your next 2 guys off the bench and type of stuff, but I wanted to represent equally, but not like favoritism where, there's going to be schools that have no kids on here. Like, I'm just going to be blunt and say it, but it's not that they don't have any good kids. It's just, I think that there's a few teams that dominate with the talent that they have. And there's some notable omissions from this list because I don't think they had probably as great of a year as they could have. And I won't name names and point those kids out, but I think you'll read through this and you'll see and be like, oh, how come that guy's not on there? It's because realistically, I didn't see from my eyeball test, I didn't think that they were deserving. So maybe they use that as motivation to prove me wrong at the next level. But so with no further ado, where do you want to start?
Okay, so I will share my screen. I've got it all typed up here and ready to go. And so those of you that are watching this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel or Facebook page, you'll be able to see it. If you're listening audio only at IdahoSports.com or wherever you download your podcasts, I will run through the names as well, and then Ryan can expound upon them. But let's start with the large school division. This is 5A, 4A, and 3A. And let's start with your awards, Ryan. As we take a look here, Coach of the Year, Sean Amos from Coeur d'Alene High. Your Offensive Player of the Year is Sandpoint dual threat, running back, receiver, slot back, whatever you want to call him, playmaker, Max Frank.
Yeah.
And
so,
then
your
and then your Defensive Player of the Year is Coeur d'Alene linebacker Shea Robertson. Go ahead.
The tackle machine. Yeah, the reincarnation of Bobby Boucher. But yeah, I mean, Coach of the Year, Sean Amos, we talked about him previously just a second ago, but like what a phenomenal job he did with that group this year. Not making the playoffs last year for the first time in what seemed like forever. Leads his team to the state championship in 5A. That's a phenomenal job, and him and his crew. I think that's a award that goes to the entire staff. We'll start with Max Frank, the Offensive Player of the Year. This is a tough one because it could have gone either way, I think, with Tevin Burns. But I look at body work, Max Frank doing it on, he even did it on defense. I mean, that kid was balled out on defense. So if you look at total snaps that Max played, I think he played it was something like 85% of the snaps each game. I mean, we just couldn't get him off the field. But what he did, 80 carries, 567 yards rushing, and only, 14 TDs. And then you throw him in the passing game, 51 receptions, 811 yards, and 7 more touchdowns. Just a phenomenal career at Sandpoint High School. Big reason why they had the success that they did the last years. He was a huge target last year. Obviously, we talked about him a lot, but 1,399 total yards with 21 TDs. That's, what else can you say? Shea Robertson, I believe, ended the year. I think he was somewhere in the neighborhood of 170 tackles on the season. I've never seen that. I mean, I don't know where else you see that. I've never personally seen it. I don't know if that's a state record in the state of Iowa. I don't know what the tackle record is. I'd have to go deep into the archives to probably find that, but to hit those numbers is just gaudy. I mean, and you look at him on defense and you watch film and you're like, who is that guy that just keeps knifing through every single play? He'll come out of nowhere. And it just seems like he'll shed a block, makes a tackle, sheds a block, makes a tackle. And he's going to go play for Eastern Washington next year. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him absolutely run roughshod over the Big Sky. He's going to make his presence known. I watch him and I equate him to what was that Montana State linebacker a couple years ago? They got drafted by the Falcons. Troy Anderson. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I look at him. He's like a Troy Anderson type athlete, just a freak out there that has a nose for the football. I would equate him also. I got to watch him a lot when I was young, in college, was Corey Hall, who played at Boise State. Same type of player. I mean, just a dude that's always around the football and just plays extremely hard. So those are my players of the year and my coach of the year awards for large school. Future
Green Bay Packers fullback Corey Hall for
right.
BSU. Yeah, I'm wearing my Packers shirt today. So, Troy Anderson from Montana State, now in the NFL, as well as Alex Singleton, another Bobcats linebacker. He plays for Denver. And I'll tell you, Eastern needs it. I've watched Eastern play a couple times this year. They've got a leaky defense, so Shea Robertson can help that out.
Yeah, he'll be a difference maker for the Eagles.
For sure. All right, let's take a look at your offensive unit. Let's start with the skill position guys, because this was so big it couldn't all fit on one screen here. So let me scroll down here to the skill positions.
I counted Spielman and Harris as one running back.
I mean, I put them as separate. So, okay, let's go position by position. I'll outline, and then you highlight what you want to highlight.
Sure.
Three quarterbacks made your squad, and I've got them listed in alphabetical order by school. There's no this guy was the best because he's listed first. It's alphabetically by school. So quarterbacks, you've got 3 of them: Caden Simmons from Coeur d'Alene, Drew Lehman from Sandpoint, Cole Meitinger from Timberlake.
I think the 3 of them, I mean, I don't know if you can really argue there as far as large school quarterbacks in North Idaho. All 3 of them had great seasons. Stat-wise, Cole Meitinger rewrote the passing books at Timberlake in a wing T offense. Um, and and it wasn't close at what he was able to do with the Tigers up there. Drew Lehman did a great job coming in for Sandpoint late, in the year in a quarterback change, steps right in, just like we saw with Caden Simmons, and just absolutely flourished. Game managers, but took what the defense presented and was extremely efficient. Great passing efficiency for both those QBs, Simmons and Lehman, and leading their teams to deep playoff runs. I mean, both those guys respectively, had great seasons in their own right, and obviously not starting the year as the starter, but finishing the year as, on my All-North Idaho team. You look at running back Owen Harris and Carson Spielman. I had together just because of the injury, but go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll outline each position, and then
Sure.
you come in with the. And now this is my show. Don't you forget it. It's your. No, I'm just kidding. These are your awards. Running backs, you really had 4 listed, but you have the Coeur d'Alene guys together. I mean, I just separated them. Owen Harris and Carson Spielman, both from Coeur d'Alene. Tevin Burns from Post Falls, Cody Brewster from Sandpoint, and Cooper Lenz from Timberlake were your running backs.
All different kinds of runners too. And that's the thing that doesn't, you look at this and this isn't by any order whatsoever. This is just team. Here you go. Because, you look at Tevin Burns, the phenomenal senior season he had for Post Falls. He was dominant in running back position. Spielman and Harris. Spielman started the year so well for the Vikings. Goes down with a knee injury against Lewiston. Harris pops in for the playoff run and doesn't miss a beat. And, that's what would Coeur d'Alene be if they still had Spielman? That's the kind of question mark, is they get all the way to state championship and they're missing their best running back. And, so those two had a phenomenal season, but Spielman had a lot to do with Coeur d'Alene getting to the playoffs. Cody Brewster at Sandpoint very quietly rushed for 1,000 yards this year. Was a touchdown machine too for the Bulldogs, but had himself a great season. Cooper Lenz went over 1,000 yards for Timberlake as well. Had himself a great season as well. We got to watch him a couple times live, and he didn't disappoint by any means in his showings, and did very well for the Tigers.
Yeah, part of that law firm backfield of Lenz, Higgins, and Tebby. And then you can't forget Jonathan Hanson, the fullback, either for Timberlake. It was a good unit. Okay, your wide receivers. We've got Jamison Kazar and Kai Wheeler, both from Coeur d'Alene, Alex Shields from Post Falls, and Jacob Yetter from Timberlake.
Yeah, and you look at this group, man. If I'm an OC and I have those 4 receivers to choose from, I mean, the world is my oyster. You got the size of Kazar that just was a matchup nightmare. When big plays were needed, he provided. Kai Wheeler stretches the field, 6'3" receiver, can go up and get the ball. We saw that in the state championship game. They really picked on the Highland DBs using Wheeler, on the jump ball. But we saw that throughout the season that Coeur d'Alene just had weapons. You didn't see any gaudy stat lines because they had other guys that are missing, like Colby Cooey could be on this list. Hagel could be on this list. There's other dudes. I mean, they just only one football to go around. Then you look at Alex Shields, had a great season for the Trojans. She really stretches the field, does a great job, got a lot of touchdowns for the Trojans. And then Jacob Yetter for Timberlake, went over 1,000 yards receiving. He's got this receiving record, if I'm not mistaken, too, for the Tigers in a single season. With him and Meitinger team together was just great in the passing attack, balancing that law firm that you talked about in the backfield. 3 great, 4 great receivers there that they're on this list, and they really stood out this year.
Yeah, kind of coupling that in, tight end one, Asher Bowie from Post Falls, another future Eag at Eastern Washington.
Another guy that can stretch the field. He's a matchup nightmare, but he also is effective as a blocker too. I mean, coming out of as the H-back, you could see him coming around the corner and setting the edge for Tevin Burns. I mean, there was a lot of runs that Tevin could, contribute and say, hey, Asher, help pop that. But yeah, great tight end. He's going to do great for the Eags as well.
Yeah, that blocking will play at the next level for sure. And speaking of blocking, let's go to the guys that are in charge of blocking up front, the offensive linemen here. We've got 3 Coeur d'Alene Vikings, Will Fairbanks, Aaron Ivankovich, and Bryson Muckenthaler. We also have 2 Post Falls Trojans, Jackson George and Brent Ludiker. Carter Vanek from Lakeland, who I forgot to put above the Post Falls guys because it's alphabetical. So let me do that. Carter Vanek, who is the biggest lineman, right, in terms of sheer size, from Lakeland. And then Luke Shell from Timberlake in there also.
Luke, and the one that stands out to me, Bryson Muckenthaler, is just an absolute mauler on the offensive line. You look at him and he just pops off tape. He's, in a running play, he's always like 5-7 yards downfield, just shoving a dude. Aaron Ivankovich, you look at, he's burying somebody. Will Fairbanks, teamed up on a double team inside on a zone. Good luck. See you later. That, off to the races. They just paved the way up front. Those three for the Vikings. Carter Vanek for Lakeland, like you said, just an absolute monster up front, but he's physical. He's not just big, he's physical. He jumps off tape, like Lovey well could, give Carter a lot of credit for the running game that Lakeland had this year. It was a lot of him running behind him. Jackson George and Brett Ludiker seem like they've been at Post Falls forever. They had phenomenal careers, but they were on this list last year. They're on it again this year. They, those two right there with the Trojans. We talk about Tevin Burns having the career he had or the season he had. A lot of the credit goes to those two dudes up front. And Luke Shell from Timberlake, we got a chance to watch him in that playoff game, was an absolute monster on the offensive front. He was just absolutely burying guy after burying man. He could have got a job at IHOP. He was serving up pancakes.
That's right. Muckenthaler the Mauler. I like it. Good riding there. Okay. Let's go to your large school defense. I think I can get all these guys in on the same screen. So here we go. Defensive linemen, Alex Brown and Aaron Ivankovich from Coeur d'Alene, Braden Thierry from Lakeland, Kyron Riddle from Sandpoint, and Jeremy Hurlbert from Timberlake.
Look at this line. I mean, you could put more dudes probably from that Coeur d'Alene front in here. There were some guys, DN from Lake City that would make some effort too, but you just look at the ones that stood up off tape and really had themselves a whale of a season. Alex Brown was an unsung guy on the edge for Coeur d'Alene. I think that he balanced that defense. You could also say that he's a linebacker too, because he did go back into the linebacking set. But Ivankovich up front was just an absolute animal. I mean, you watch him and you look at what Shea Robertson's able to do. It's because Ivankovich is getting a lot of double teams too. And he's clearing the way for some of these other guys that you'll see from Coeur d'Alene that just their tackle numbers were absolutely ridiculous. You could pretty much almost put like all 11 dudes on this list realistically, just because of the stats that this group had, especially from takeaways. But Braden Thierry was just physical up front for Lakeland. I mean, if you want to look for bright spots for that group, there's him. He stood out, on the defensive front, just very physical. Did a great job. Kyron Riddle from Sandpoint pressured the QB like crazy. He was quick off the edge. He's physical. He's great in the run game. Can't really knock him. And then Jeremy Herbert for Timberlake, we saw him get a turnover in the playoffs. I mean, he's just everywhere. That guy was an animal at defensive end and just an absolute beast for the Tigers. So capping off a great run for Timberlake too. Obviously losing to Sugar though, but I like that. I like that group a lot. I really do.
And then your linebackers, you've got 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, 5. Okay. Parker Neff from Coeur d'Alene, Garrett Leonard from Lake City, Cooper Craig from Post Falls, Wiley Wimmer from Sandpoint, and Caius Tebby from Timberlake.
This one may have been the hardest group to choose from, just because there's so many guys in linebacker that just excel and play at a very high level in North Idaho. There's some guys that are omitted from this list that are dudes too. Parker Neff for Coeur d'Alene, in my mind, may have been one of the unsung heroes for that defense. I mean, he was just there. He needed a big stop. If they're going to get to a double team on either Robertson or Ivankovich up front, Neff slices in, forces fumbles like crazy. The guy's just a turnover causing machine. He's a havoc causer, kind of like we like to talk about the last few years with some of the guys around the area. But Garrett Leonard quietly had a monster season for Lake City. I mean, I think he had over 90 tackles for the T-Wolves on defense from the Mike linebacker position. Cooper Craig, we talk about him, difference maker on defense. This guy's physical, plays sideline to sideline like his hair is on fire. Wasn't healthy a lot of this year. I think we could have really seen a bigger year from him. He had a hip injury he was battling most of the season, but still he's going to play at the next level, and he's going to play at a high level. Like Cooper, he's a great kid, but just a physical ball hawking type of defender. Wiley Wimmer, very quietly for Sandpoint, had himself a great season. I mean, over 75 tackles, really pushed defensively, and a Sandpoint unit that really hangs their hat on the linebacking group. Wiley does a great job. And then Caius Tebby from Timberlake was one of the leading interception guys in the state from the linebacking position. I think he had 5 picks on the season. He was just an animal out there, had a whole gob of tackles, but just, caused trouble out there. He was, Captain Chaos out there for Timberlake.
Yeah, I'm glad you put Garrett Leonard on there because I was on the call for Lake City and Post Falls, and he was everywhere. I was so impressed with him. And Cooper Craig was an all-state DB the last 2 years and was asked to move up closer to the line of scrimmage. And he said, okay, yeah, let's do it. And totally embraced it. Speaking of, it's time to take a look at the defensive backs here. We have Jason Cady and Nolan Christ from Coeur d'Alene, Dayton Phillips from Lewiston, Eli Alshouse from Sandpoint, and Jacob Yetter of Timberlake.
It's crazy is if you go statewide 11-man football, you have 3 of the top 6 DBs in the state in this group as far as interceptions go, between Jason Cady, Nolan Christ, and Jacob Yetter. Those guys obviously stand out on film. If you watch, Cady he's an animal. Nolan Christ plays at free safety, and he is just sideline to sideline every single play. He's like one of those kids when I coach that you just know he likes to get his name called. So he's just going to run around and find the football. So he's in on a play, either it's a half tackle or, he gets an assist on the tackle, or he's making the solo in the secondary, but breaks up passes like crazy. Dayton Phillips for Lewiston in the secondary was a monster for the Bengals, in a team that we expected, I thought, a bigger showing from this year. He was a bright spot on that defensive side of the ball. And then Eli Alshouse from Sandpoint quietly in the secondary. Did a great job. I mean, you could put him, he was generally on the best receiver from each team, and played up. He didn't play down to his competition. You put him against the best guy and generally kept those guys in check for the most part in each game. So that's what you ask for from that group. I like these DBs. This defense is crazy top to bottom if you really look at it. There's going to be a lot of all-state kids on this group.
Yes, definitely well represented group. And then your big school, I put small school, but that's big school. Special teams. Kicker is Owen Forsman from Lakeland. The punter is Jordan Tyler of Sandpoint. 2 return men, Aiden Tirana from Post Falls and Cooper Lenz of Timberlake.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk with Owen Forsman. I'm so people will talk about Connington from Mountain View a lot. Forsman, in my mind, is the best kicker in the state of Idaho. And the Vandals got themselves an absolute gem in the special teams here with Owen Forsman. He's going to do great things for the Vandals at the next level. And he's physical for a kicker, too. He played some linebacker for the Hawks. He would step in on defense when they needed him. And, Jordan Tyler for Sandpoint did a great job punting. His punt average was pretty outstanding, actually, very quietly, that people didn't really talk about punters much in high school football. But does a great job flipping the field for the Bulldogs. And then Triana and Lenz in the return game, those 2 guys are threats every time they get the ball. Great job by both of them, and some huge returns for this season, and consistently getting their teams in great field position.
Yeah, really good group of guys there. So those were your large school awards. Now we're going to go to the small school. This is your 2A, 1A D1, 1A D2. Let's start with the awards. And here we go. Coach of the Year, Nick Holloway from Logos. The Offensive Player of the Year was his quarterback, Jack Driscoll, also from Logos. Defensive Player of the Year, Porter Whipple, the stud defensive lineman from Kamei. It's a sweep for the 1A D1 White Pine League in the awards section here, Scaggs.
I don't know if you could really argue, though. I mean, Holloway, what he did with Logos and taking them to the state semifinals with a team that previous year only had 3 wins. They've been in existence for 3 years, and you make a run like this. Just an awesome job from Coach Holloway and his crew. You look at Jack Driscoll. I don't know how he's not going to be the 1A D1 State Player of the Year. I mean, you may make an argument for the kid from Butte County. But the stat line is just 3,400 total yards with 1 interception, 36 touchdowns pass. I mean, come on. That's a crazy bonkers stat number. And then 109 carries. I mean, he's over 10 yards a carry with 18 touchdowns running. I mean, that's just good grief. That offensively, Jack had a phenomenal senior season. And the Porter Whipple was just absolutely dominant for Kamei. I mean, guys drawing a double team on every single play. He's leading in sacks. He's like one of the top guys in tackles in 1A D1. The guy's just on fire everywhere he goes on the field. Like, I don't know how you couldn't choose him as the most dominant defensive player in small school football in District 1 or District 2.
Yeah, I mean, a pretty typical stat line for Porter Whipple would be like 12 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble. Like,
Yep.
and it's just another day at the office for Porter Whipple.
Ho hum.
Yes, very incredible athlete. All right, here is your small school offense. I think I can get everybody on the screen here. Okay, so 3 quarterbacks: Dave Clute of Kamei, Ty Kep of Kendrick, Jack Clark of Potlatch. 2 of these 3 guys are coming back next year.
Yep. And you look at this, obviously this is not by any particular order, so nobody like hate mail me or anything like that. It's just alphabetical by school.
Right.
But yeah, Dave Clute, I mean, great job for Kamei. They're going to be a threat next year. Ty Kep, we talked about him in his senior season and what he had as a career, 3 state championships as the quarterback for the Tigers. And then Jack Clark quietly led Potlatch to a very great season and playoff appearance. You know, we're talking about all these guys, and there's going to be some dudes that, you know, they could be at the top of the list again next year just based off of what we saw from them this year.
Yep. Running backs, 3 of them as well. Sawyer Hewitt of Kendrick, Gage Crow of Lewis County, and Trey Gibson from St. Mary's.
I don't think you have any misses in this group. I don't know if we have any. There's some schools will be like, oh, you're missing this guy or whatever. I don't care. Like, these 3 dudes right here, sign me up. I'll take him first pick, you know, in small school football. It's as good as it gets. Sawyer Hewitt is an absolute machine. You could have him at receiver too. But he just plays everywhere on the field. He's an absolute monster. I think he had over 1,500 total yards this year. Just a ridiculous. It was like 2.1 plays per touchdown for Sawyer Hewitt on the season. Gage Crow had 1,000 yards, I think, by week 4. Rushing, just a crazy banana season for Gage. And then Trey Gibson led the state, any classification, led the entire state of Idaho in rushing this season in total yards. Phenomenal senior season for the Lumberjack ball carrier. This trio here is a phenomenal group of athletes and you know, well deserving of my All-North Idaho awards.
Yeah, I think some omissions people might ask about, Cooper Poxleitner from Grangeville, Colton O'Kane from Kamei. They were in their teams were winning so dominantly every week. They just weren't getting a ton of touches and plenty of talented playmakers on those offenses to share the load. Rylan West from Timberline, of course, was injured for, 5/6 of the year or something like that. If he had played the full year, there's a case to be made, but those are all good players that just missed the cut.
Yeah. And you've got kids from like Mullen St. Regis. I mean, there's injuries obviously played into factoring in this, completing the season and stuff like that too. But I mean, I could expand this list to probably 20 kids if I really wanted to, but I didn't, since 8-man. So
we got to draw the line. Yeah, we got to draw the line somewhere. Receivers, 3 of them: Hunter Taylor of Kendrick, Lucius Comas of Logos, Julian Davis from Wallace.
I look at that group, and Davis quietly had himself a whale of a season. And that's a team that doesn't get talked about a lot because they're tucked away in the Silver Valley. But Julian Davis was a touchdown machine for the Miners. And had himself a great year. We know about Logos's offense. Comas had a great season, and Hunter Taylor, 1.8 plays per touchdown on the season. I mean, it was like he literally scored almost every other time he touched the football, sometimes every time he touched the ball. We saw him in games, I think it was 3 separate times this year. Every single time he touched the ball, it was on a touchdown. That's a banana stat you just don't really see every day. Those 3 are more than well deserving. This is a trio that you look at, it's like, man, those are 3 dudes I'd want on my team any day of the week.
Tight end is Nathan Twite from Kendrick as well. He'll be back next year. Yeah,
he could be on the top of that quarterback list next year, or he could be right back there at receiver again. So we'll see. But no, Nathan had a great season as well, and an offensive threat. He really stretched the field for that Tigers offense. Just really added to that, lethal group that they had on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. And then up front on the offensive line, you kept it to 5 guys this time. I was impressed. Cole Mintkin from Clark Fork, Porter Whipple from Kamei, Brock Boyer. Boy, I put Kamei for all these. Brock Boyer and Dallas Morgan are from Kendrick. We don't want to get that twisted.
Yeah, you're going to get some yellings out there.
Yeah. Brock Boyer, Dallas Morgan, both from Kendrick, and then Jackson Nantel from St. Mary's.
You look at this group, I think quietly some of the ones we know about Whipple, Boyer, and Morgan. Like, we talk about them a lot. They're going to get a lot of notoriety. They're going to be all state guys. You like Cole Mintkin a lot. Somebody that you saw in a few games this year, and you raved about him. I agree. Like that, he's just a baller. Like that kid plays so dang hard. He's an absolute. We talk about Muckenthaler, who is a mauler. That's Mintkin too. Mintkin's just an animal. He gets after it. He'll mix it up, get in dudes' faces a little bit. He's like one of those guys that just plays with an edge. And then Jackson Nantel. It's somebody that like not a lot of people watch. He plays that left side, that left tackle position for St. Mary's. They ran left a lot for a reason. This dude is an absolute monster on film. If you watch him, he is absolutely planting dudes play after play. He'll go 10 yards downfield. There was one play I watched, I think it was against Riverside from Washington. He hit the DN, pushed him 5 yards back. The dude fell. He went and found a linebacker and pancaked him 15 yards downfield on a big run. I mean, this is a dude that just gets after it. This group, these five, they could play big school ball. I mean, you really want to talk about as far as players go, these five up front can really go after it.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great story. Yeah, I loved watching Cole Minkin play. And then by the end of the year, they were putting him at running back too, and he was trucking guys running the ball. He would play guard, and then, next play he'd be in the backfield, and then he'd be back at guard, and to handle two positions at the same time. Pretty impressive there for Cole Minkin. Let's take a look at the small school defense up front on the defensive line, Ryan. We've got Carter Munt from Grangeville, the dude. Brock Boyer and Dallas Morgan repeat here for Kendrick. And then Ben Elvin from Prairie makes it also.
Yeah, and I think that, those two dudes that are up in the Prairie up there with Munt and Elvin, quietly just great seasons. Elvin at D end is an absolute beast. He'll find a home somewhere. That kid can play. You look at Carter Munt and what the Grangeville Bulldogs are able to do, making the playoffs this year, obviously winning the CIL. We know about Boyer and Morgan. We talk a ton about him. Boyer, Morgan draws a double team literally every play. And then Boyer just cleans up. I mean, we watched how did Camas County get held to under 100 yards rushing? Those two had a lot to do with it. Which opened the door for Clemenhagen and Fitzmaurice on the back end. But like those two guys up front were just absolute machines.
Yep. Your linebacking core also really good, led by a pair of Kendrick Tigers here, Lane Clemenhagen and Wyatt Fitzmaurice. Also at linebacker from Lapway, Elias Yearout, and from Prairie, Chris Schumacher.
Yeah, I think with this group here, I mean, you watch them on film, their guys, Yearout, he can flex back and play in the secondary too. He can go on the passing game, and he's an athlete. I mean, the guy loves to play hard, and we know about his brother, right? Everybody talked about him and how he was the Gatorade Player of the Year for small school when he was at Lapway his senior season. But Elias is an animal, and Chris Schumacher is a player that very quietly had himself a phenomenal season for the Pirates. A team that obviously missed the playoffs, but they were close for a reason. My mind, they should have been in the playoffs. Like that's a team that's a absolutely staying on the omission that the Pirates can't get in because of bids in District 3, but that's a beef that I've got with the state elsewhere. And then you talk about Clemenhagen and Fitzmaurice. Those two guys, man, they are absolute animals. We saw them on Thursday night last week, and it seemed like every other play we're calling one of them for something. Like they're doing something. Either it's a big tackle for loss, it's breaking up a pass, it's causing a turnover. Those guys are just everywhere. That quad group right there of linebackers is for small school in the state of Idaho. I mean, Idaho 8 man better be watching this Prepcast, because there's a bunch of dudes that could be on their awards for the end of the year awards that they do too.
Yeah, for sure. Elias Yearout, dynamic offensive player also for Lapway. And speaking of Big Brother Titus, he logged like 17 or 18 minutes for the Vandals in their most recent game. He's hooping it up as a redshirt freshman at U of I. So keep up the good work, Yearout family.
Yeah.
There's
a bunch more of them coming.
Yeah, there are a lot of. I think Titus told me 7 or 8 siblings behind him. So, oh boy. DBs: Everett Oatman from Kamei, Mason Kimberling, the Moose from Kendrick, Quincy Hall from Lakeside, Jack Driscoll from Logos.
We talk about each group. It's like, oh man, this is a dominant group. This is a dominant group. This is a dominant group. This group is dominant too. I mean, Everett Oatman was one of the premier DBs in 8-man football. Had a whole gob of interceptions this year. Was really active in the secondary for that Cami team. I mean, you could throw Dave Clute in this group too. I think that's one that people are going to say like, hey, that's an omission there because Clute was an animal on defense too. Mason Kimberlink, Moose is an animal. Like Moose, you don't get 6'1" DBs in the secondary very often that can move like he does and can cover downfield. And you put him with the best receiver of each team or the best, athlete that's out there on the edge. And he's a blanket. Quincy Hall, super active at DB for Lakeside. You saw him a couple times. He's just everywhere. He's a beast out there on the field. He plays hard. He goes at it, and he's a turnover magnet. And then Jack Driscoll, equally good on the defensive side of the ball as we saw as he was on offense. He was dynamic in the secondary too for that Logos team.
Yeah, really dynamic group of athletes there. And let's get to our special teams, where we're going to see a same name in a couple of different spots here. Kofi Apia from Mullen St. Regis, not only as a kicker, but as a return man. And Hunter Taylor from Kendrick also makes it as a returner. I mean, all he did was have punt returns for touchdowns in 2 of 3 games in the postseason.
Yeah, no, and those are two guys that they just play hard. Like I love Kofi Apia's story. He hasn't played organized football until I think he was a freshman or sophomore. Came over from Ghana and just plays so dang hard. He's a soccer guy, but he took those talents to the kicking game and was great at pinning opponents deep. For Mullen St. Regis, we watched him in the playoff games. The wet ball was still able to get into it. Some great placement, and then in the return game, we saw him return a touchdown. I mean, he had a touchdown return on a kickoff, and Hunter Taylor as well. We know about him, the touchdown machine, and two just very dynamic players that played extremely hard for their respective programs, and a lot to be proud about. But the special teams awards, we could name those the Kofi Apia awards.
Really, and a special player and a special program, certainly there with Mullen St. Regis. So, yeah, those were the North Idaho, the All-North Idaho football teams for 2023, aka as I like to call them, the Scaggs Awards. I say that with love, of course. I know you put a lot of time and effort into this, and I know all these kids appreciate getting a little love, getting the spotlight shined on them a little bit too. So thank you.
Man, they're well deserved. I mean, that's the thing that we talk about this off air a lot. It's like, why do we do this? It's because we genuinely care about these athletes and getting their place in the spotlight that they deserve. I mean, they put in a ton of work, and this is something that we track throughout the season. I mean, I start taking notes probably week 1, week 2, and then it pays off in the long run. I mean, they showed up and showed out, so well deserving.
Yep. So kudos there. Before we get out of here, Ryan, and take our break for Thanksgiving, I did want to talk just briefly some girls basketball action, specifically the 5A programs from up here in North Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Lake City, Post Falls. They all traveled south to take on some of the Boise schools, including Rocky Mountain, last year's state runner-up, of course, and also Boise High. And I'm trying to remember who the third team in the
Mountain View
was. A Mountain View. So and let's see, was it Rocky or
Hawaii was in on the mix too. Yeah.
Okay, so Boise, Hawaii, and Mountain View. So Lake City goes down. It's a clean sweep. They beat Boise in the season opener 49-43. Boise's kind of one of the favorites this year. They've assembled a super team down there. They beat Hawaii 48-45, and then they beat Mountain View 77-45. So let's start there. Lake City girls go 3-0, 2 tight wins, and then a laugher on the third day.
Yeah, and then you talk about you don't want to have a letdown. They come in the opening game and beat the number 1 team in the state. Well, some are saying the number 1 team in the state. You could argue between Coeur d'Alene and them. But like you said, a super team nonetheless. They come in with this group. Everybody's talking Coeur d'Alene. Everybody's talking Boise coming into the year. And Avery Waddington's like, hold the phone real quick. Like you got to throw us back into the conversation too, with that cast of players around her, with Zufelt, There's, Pickford and everybody else. And that's a good group of girls, man. That's a good team. They come in and get a huge win over Boise. They followed up. They were down, I think it was 17 to Hawaii, and come back and win the game late in that one as well. Like, that's a huge win for 2 back-to-back massive wins for that program. And then to follow it up, they flex on Mountain View in the capper. So Lake City shows up. I mean, they're kind of get my pat of the back award for the week. That the team of the week in 5A for girls is definitely Lake City.
Yeah. Coeur d'Alene goes down and goes 2-1. They beat Hawaii 60-46. They beat Mountain View 63-36. And then they drew the short straw, having to play Boise the 3rd game in 3 days. I mean, this is how it'll be at state too, but they lose by 10, 53-43. So people are going, oh, Lake City beat Boise and Coeur d'Alene didn't. That doesn't mean anything. I don't think. I think both of these teams are going to be really good. They're both going to push each other all year long.
Yeah, and you look at, Coeur d'Alene's going to have to, there's only one basketball on the floor at a time. This group's going to gel together as the season comes along between the 2 Colvin sisters, and you throw, Maddie Mitchell in the mix as well. They're going to have, Kelsey Carroll as well. There's some talent on the floor for that Vikings team. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to be in the mix come late in the year, but there's just a little bit of, I think, continuity, trying to find their identity early on. That's going to be I don't think a challenge necessarily, but it's just going to be the things that they work through. This loss to Boise, I wouldn't really hold a ton of weight in, other than it's a good litmus test to know where you need to work and what you need to work on by the time you maybe face them again in the postseason.
Yep. And then Post Falls, they go 0-3 on the trip. They fall to Hawaii, Mountain View, and Boise. But they showed flashes of competitiveness, and for Brian Hall's team, life without Capri Sims is going to be tough, but I think they're going to be right there in the mix this year also. So
yeah, and there's some talent on that roster too, so they can make things interesting. But they're going to have to find their balance as well, and find, like, we talk about identity, but life without Capri Sims, how's that offense going to work, and who's the ball going to go through in order to get the scoring output week in and week out.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. I think Letty Asper is the person they're looking to down low. Brooklyn Brennan a little bit on the perimeter. Also, she just signed with MSU Billings. But if you want all the girls basketball coverage, we've got previews for every conference, every conference in the state, with coaches' quotes, players to watch, season previews. It's all right there, top of the homepage at IdahoSports.com. You can check everything out there. Otherwise, that is going to do it for this edition of the North Idaho Prepcast. Ryan, Turkey Day plans. What do you got on tap?
Turkey Day, will be hanging out here on Thursday, then going down to visit my folks on the weekend. So my wife's got to work on Wednesday and Friday. So other than that, we're kind of holding tight. We're going to do we're saving the traditional Thanksgiving dinner for Saturday. So we're doing steak on Thursday. So that'll be okay with me. So
cool. Man, that's a bummer for the missus. She's got to work on Wednesday and Friday. That's brutal, man. I used to have to do that and I hated it, man. It's nice working at places that allow you a little time off for the holiday, right?
Yeah.
And you're your own boss, so.
Yeah, I'm my own boss, so I mean, I'll probably cut out Wednesday and Friday. So it's all my son's home all week though too, so we get to hang out all Thanksgiving break, and yeah, so a lot of father-son time, probably throwing the football around or something like that outside if the weather's nice. If it doesn't, hopefully snow again.
Might be more thrilling than the real life football happening on Thanksgiving. So
I'm just glad that we got to be the appetizer to the main course on Thursday. So yeah,
that's right. Okay, well, everybody have a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Whatever you're doing, staying home, traveling, whatever you're doing, please be safe. We want you all back here next week as we break down everything going on in North Idaho. Once again, for Ryan Scaggs, I'm Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in to the North Idaho Prepcast on IdahoSports.com.